So our next session, the topic will be the future of work using AI and blockchain technologies to design work around the human experience. Will presented by the co-founder and CTO at Blackbox AI, Mr. Ben Stewart. Ben's background is rooted in finance, and Ben is focused on intersection of AI and blockchain. Now please welcome Ben.
Hello. First of all, I'd like to thank the organizers for putting on this amazing event. It's great to see so many talented people here working to solve some really hard problems. It's really exciting. Hi, I'm Ben. So I'm current co-founder and CTO of Blackbox AI, and we're a technology company specializing in blockchain and AI. And we're really working to make decentralized collaboration easier for PhDs, engineers, and futurists. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I'm a huge foodie, and I also love a good bourbon. I have a strong background in finance, originally starting at a UBS investment bank, then transitioning to the Carlyle Group. I've had a host of objectives ranging from quantitative trade strategies to automating operations assessments. And I was actually an early engineer at a company called Betterment, which is one of the largest robo-advisors. While there, I helped scale the platform to 300,000 users and have around 10 billion assets under management. I also built out one of their 401k systems from scratch. And if anyone is familiar with the 401k system, it is full of edge cases and it is not fun at all. Currently, I'm focused on the intersection of, blockchain and AI, what we like to call Web 3.0. And also a little background about myself. Some people say, oh man, he's tall, he must have played sports. So to save everyone's breath, I did. I played at University of Connecticut, and we won the national championship in 2011. So through my journey, I've learned a lot, and I'm really looking forward to sharing that experience with you all. The next 20 years. What will the next 20 years look like? We have self-driving taxis to Mars. Will we have embedded technologies? Will we have a robot workforce? I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know. But I know that it'll be a lot different than it is today. And is this exciting or scary? What do you guys think? Are people excited? People scared? I've definitely heard a blend. I've definitely heard a blend. But me personally, I'm excited. When you think about it, we have these two concurrent revolutions taking place right now with AI and blockchain, and we're just starting to realize the advantages that these pose. And the work that I do has been, a lot of trial and error, but I've learned a lot. And through this process, I'm looking forward to I'll dive more into the details, but through this process, it's just been amazing seeing the community come together, learning new things, and just building new technologies that are adding value to organizations. So what we do at Blackbox AI is that we help companies leverage AI and blockchain strategies. This can range from everything on making organizations more efficient, we can look to maximize revenue, or we can just use these technologies to unlock new opportunities. And as we go into this new age, right, we're starting to see a trend with some of the clients that we work with. And we're starting to see them looking to digitize their physical assets and look to access unstructured data in new ways. And while working on some AI projects, see, these are some of the problems that we've ran into. Organizations, sometimes have a problem with finding the appropriate talent. They sometimes are unable to create a strategy or create a business use case definition for it. So it usually involves a lot of exploration, education, to help identify how AI or blockchain can add value to the organization. In terms of implementing blockchain technology, it's a little different than AI. I'll give you guys a second to read this. But essentially, the education component is critical for blockchain because there is definitely a lack of general understanding about the topic. So I find a lot of my time being spent discussing this and going back to that exciting or scary point, I have to tell them, blockchain and AI aren't here to cut your heads off and take your job. They're here to help. They're here to make you better. They're here to unlock new opportunities and possibilities. And what we've seen while working with organizations is that we like to, find some common ground. So some of the areas that we look for are usually like, high volume, very repetitive tasks, and we're able to kind of wrap a business use case around that and justify, using some sort of AI or blockchain technology. And this has been a fun process working with the clients because we've learned a lot. We've learned how organizations operate. And while building our team internally at Blackbox AI, we've done a lot of cool things. So we've been around for a little over a year. And throughout this process, we've looked to quantify as much as we could. And when you think about that, that leads to some very juicy data, as I like to call it. And those of you who are familiar with data, who are comfortable around data, you guys know the value of having quality data. And what we've done internally is that we've looked to quantify as much as possible. So we think about the thousands of conversations we've had. We've cataloged everything. We've recorded it, we've transcribed it, and we've used it to pull out things like sentiment, value, trends, and see kind of what are people talking about, what are they saying. We've also looked to catalog, other public interactions, so things like Slack, email, and other project lifecycle data. And I want to touch on the project lifecycle data component because I think that's really interesting. What we've looked to do is quantify projects in new ways. We didn't think that it was enough to look at a project and be like, okay, did it have a deadline? Was it done? Okay, was the client happy? Yes. That's not enough. We're way too advanced to just settle for that. And what we've done is we've looked at things like work quality. We've relied on things like expert consensus to see ways that we could save new data and make better estimates in the future. And I think that has been extremely useful. It has actually added a lot. It has made our estimates more accurate. It's made them more reusable. We're able to provide clear compensation to contributors. And I think that that's overall just added a ton of value to the organization. Also, we've operated in a global decentralized team, which I'm going to touch on in the next slide. But essentially, we have contributors that are all around the world. And we believe strongly in the idea of project-based compensation. And through this process, right, communication is extremely important. When you're working with different people in different time zones, it's vital that everyone is on the same page. And also the last point, client work, right? So as we're operating in a decentralized team across the world, we've been able to tackle some really hard problems. And it's not like we're doing things that have necessarily already been done before. We're not building pizza delivery startups for people. We're solving AI and blockchain problems for organizations that have, millions of users. During this process, we developed a vision. And I think this kind of fits with the theme of blockchain, decentralization, and equal opportunity. And we really back this idea with data. And we don't care where you are. We don't care how old you are, what you look like. None of that. It doesn't matter. We really just care about the value that you're adding. And we're able to track the value you're adding by quantifying those things that I mentioned before. So after we had this vision and we had our juicy data, right, we were able to pair those two things together. And really a quantitative meritocracy was born. And I think that this has been an interesting and fun and exciting process because by taking this data, right, whether that is those Slack conversations that we're quantifying, whether that's the emails we're looking at, whether that's the phone conversations of potential candidates that we had while interviewing, I'm talking thousands of these, we were able to back into key statistics about these contributors, things that made them happy, things that made, their work more enjoyable. And as we kind of tackle this idea and what we envision as the future of work, we saw this as having tremendous value because it's not something that's just going to stop right now, that we're done, that we think that our job is finished. No, the future of work, those next 20 years, we don't necessarily know what they're going to be, but we know that they're going to be a lot different than they are today. And we're building the tools for the contributors, for organizations to really take advantage. And after pouring through those, conversations and looking at the data, running different, sentiment analyses on them, we were able to kind of, back into these three areas that we saw tremendous value in. So incentivization, right? Just talking briefly about this compensation. And you're like, Ben, you poured over, millions of data points to tell me that people care about getting paid. And it's more than that. It's not just about getting paid, because if you realize if you've ran an organization, you know that it's more than money. It's about value. People feel as though they want to get out what they put in. They want to be appropriately compensated. But in order to do that, you have to factor in more data points than having a flat salary. So what did we do? We looked at cost of living averages. We looked at their dependents. We looked at everything on a project level and rewarded based on, the work quality. And we found that really driving incentivization for the contributor. And that kind of goes into, the idea of value and flexibility, right? As we kind of usher in this next stage, this next kind of era of work, right, we see a lot more flexibility. Like I said before, it doesn't matter where you are. Like if you have a family, sometimes, things come up and you can't make it in the office. It should be easy to either transition what you were going to do for that day or work from home. So we're building the tools to make that possible. Governance. This is a fun one and one that I really like leveraging, kind of blockchain technologies for, because we can rely on a more fluid government and like this idea of a liquid democracy where people have, obviously a vested stake, but they're able to add value on things that impact them. And that's coming down to transparency. And we think that that's a critical component, is that if a decision is affecting someone, we believe that they should have awareness to it and should be able to provide feedback towards it. And that's something that we've definitely worked towards and are getting better at. And this idea of feedback, right? It's not something that's, responding to a survey saying, are you satisfied? That's not enough. Look at us, we're using AI, we have Teslas going, in orbit, and we just want to fill out a brief survey about feedback? No, it should be more than that. It should be a fluid process. It should be continuous through the life cycle of a project, through the life cycle of someone's employment at the organization. And we've started doing new ways, we started tracking this in new ways, and providing that feedback, we've seen great growth in some of the contributors. And then also input. So I briefly touched on this, but that's the idea that your voice is important. And that with the organization, we want to make sure that you're adding value, that your voice is heard, that your input is felt, because we think that's a major, major driver for the work quality that you put out. And the last one is growth. The first point is opportunity. People want opportunity. And we've seen that. We rely on a project-based approach, and that has allowed people to focus on, the things that they want to do. And I think that's an interesting idea, because I think so many people, wake up and they're unhappy, and that's extremely frustrating for me to see time and time again. And really, when we crafted our vision, what me and the founder originally spoke about was this idea of a soul-sucking job. And we saw that as being extremely, extremely bothersome, but we've all been there. We've all had those jobs where we spend an extra 15 minutes in the shower because we don't want to go into the office. And our goal is that we need to change that, whether that's in an existing organization or a new one. We want to provide tools that allow a better work experience. Then also access. So this is the idea of, an individual's workflow. It's important that, tools aren't siloed, that someone has to go use a ton of different programs to get their job done. We want things to be in one place, we want them to be seamless, and we want them to be, usable. So that's really the motivation behind access. So now you're talking, okay, Ben, you've been, you mentioned the blockchain, this and that, but really what about it? How are you guys really leveraging it, right? And one of the ways we're leveraging it is this idea of project team matchmaking. So when I talk about juicy data, one of the things that we track are skills of contributors and also skills required for a project. Since everything's project-based, we capture them on a very granular level. And that allows us to not only make that estimate process more clearly and compensate more appropriately, but this allows us to match teams up more efficiently. So when a new project hits the desk, we're able to already look at what skills people have, who's busy, how fast will they get this done, what's the budget, how does that work? And we're able to create this new matchmaking experience in a way that makes sense. Another thing we rely on is expert consensus, and we've seen great value in that. Expert consensus is made extremely easy through things like the blockchain, because we can rely on our network of these PhDs, these engineers, these researchers that I mentioned, and get their feedback on all critical points, right? Whether that's a project, whether that's them leaving feedback for something else, whether that's us getting feedback on a decision that we made, we see that vital in the growth of our organization. If we have a ton of smart people, why wouldn't we want to use them at every point that we could? Then also this idea of rewarding expected output, or rewarding good behavior. I think this is critical. And with these technologies, we're able to kind of specify what the output of behavior is. And we're able to align our goals, both at a high level and a low level, to achieve that. And same thing when someone isn't contributing the way that we expect, if something isn't going right, we know that. We're aware, and we're able to correct it. So the future. So I talked about all these, these different concepts, these things, but how does that really wrap up into the future? And really what we're building is, a blockchain-based platform that allows contributors to provide, the best work of their life, right? We really see this evolving as an operating system of sorts. by allowing these tools, by allowing contributors to have access to things, by giving them projects that they want to do, we see tremendous value in that. We see more happiness because they're working on things they care about. We all know that our work quality is higher when we're doing things we enjoy. And if we don't enjoy doing something, why are we doing it? I get it, sometimes we have to, but not all the time. And also for organizations, right? It's like we've all seen it. We're familiar with AI, we're familiar with blockchain, but why are still some organizations so inefficient? Why does this bloat still exist? Why are they still relying on middlemen to get things done? We want to change that. We think we have the tools to do that, and we're learning a lot on this journey, and it's been great to add value so far. Also, on another note, we think that this idea of Web 3.0 is very interesting, and we started building out a lot of tools in that space, right? And so that's like the idea of having intelligent agents on the blockchain. And I've spoken a little bit about, decentralized autonomous organizations in the past. I won't weigh down this talk too much about that, but essentially we see great value in pairing these two amazing technologies together, using AI and blockchain in ways that make sense. And we're able to do things like, as we talk about, the project team matchmaking, why not have AI help us steer in the right direction? And then also, right, we've been starting to play around with this kind of cool new ideas, powering different machine learning models using a blockchain data store. And that's been an interesting process, just because we think that the blockchain has a lot of advantages, whether those are through immutability or, resiliency to hacking, this and that. We're starting now to usher in this way where we're able to use that to power different machine learning models. And that's definitely exciting because as our system, this operating system continues to grow, it's all transactional based, right? So different events that we go through during the day, we're saving them, we're storing them. But now we're able to pull out that insight using machine learning. Thank you. I can be reached at ben@blackbox.ai for any questions. But I think I have a few minutes left if people have questions now.
How long do you think until the decentralized stack is sufficiently built out that you can actually run the decentralized machine learning with a decentralized data store?
Yeah, great question. So I've actually built some, like little MVPs in place, and we're starting to do some different cool, exciting things. One of the first things we did was actually put, part of ImageNet onto the blockchain. And essentially what we did to do that was just, convert each pixel to an array and have that in essentially one big, almost like, an array of arrays. And we were able to hash that to the blockchain. So that was exciting. But for us to really start leveraging that as a data store, I would say within the next, 2 to 3 months. Nothing else? Oh, yeah.
Seems like there is an increasing, force from the bigger guys to try to have kind of the best of both worlds, but they have the private blockchain and then they want the public blockchain as well. What are your thoughts on how the public blockchain can actually come back and try to get access to some of the private stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think in very timely now as we see kind of news of Facebook, exploring a cryptocurrency and this and that. Personally, I think that there is great value in businesses to leverage private blockchains. And some of the client work we've seen, we go over the advantages, we do the business use case definitions, and we're able to apply that. In terms of them, leveraging a public blockchain, it doesn't make sense for a lot of people. I think that with some of the giants, they just don't want to get left behind. And that's why you're seeing them kind of dip their toes in both areas, is that a lot of the power of blockchain technologies is they work best at scale, right? When they're just starting out, like, think about, Bitcoin, 6-7 years ago, when it's just starting out, the system is smaller, the market cap is lower, so it's easier for, takeovers, it's easier to change things. So I think that they just don't want to get left behind. And that's why we've been working fast to try and get ahead, because we see great value in moving quickly and getting ahead of them.
It's very exciting to see what you guys are doing. I'm a true believer that blockchain give you the provenance of the data and history of the data that you can apply AI on top of it. You can do really cool stuff, right? I mean, that's where you are in. My question is that it's a big industry that you're hitting.
Yeah.
It's going to fundamentally change everything. But how are you getting your data now, right? How are you building how are you acquiring the data? How are you building your models? I mean, that could be one of the big challenges you have, I believe.
Yeah, definitely. So internally, right, how we're capturing the data is a few different ways in terms of phone conversations and things like Slack messages. What we're essentially doing is we're parsing those and just saving them to a centralized database and then using those for testing. So nothing too crazy there. And as the system, continues to build, the goal is to store those obviously in a more decentralized way and have that data more accessible and have the process more fluid. It was a little manual up front, but it's something that we've been doing since day one. So since we've started, we made it a priority to have, clean data and to be saving as much as we could. And so we found it a lot easier to, as we've grown and scaled, to really, be able to persist and save new things. But it's been an interesting process because now we're looking at what else can we quantify? Like these things like expert consensus or feedback. How can we, persist those, access them, and utilize them in ways to gain new intuition, not only about, contributors, but about the organization as a whole.
So can I ask you one more question?
Yeah, of course.
How are you creating this ecosystem, right? Because it requires experts, it requires the companies which will provide you with the data, right? Then you acquire your meta models, you apply on top of it and try to glean something out of it. And it should have incentivized the system, right? I mean, I'm trying, my question leading towards crypto economics, right? So
yeah.
Can you share some thoughts on it?
Yeah, what we're disclosing publicly. So yeah, over the past year, we've built a team. We're up to 16 full-time employees now, and we have another 16 that are more casual contributors, right? And through that process, we think that we pose a good competitive advantage to the guys like the Facebooks and the Googles of the world, because we offer this approach where we don't care, where you live, right? You can live anywhere and you're still going to get fair and appropriate compensation, and you're going to have full transparency into that. But our process has been, definitely evolving and dynamic, and we've sought out that expertise from, these guys who've been at, Apple for 30 years and wanted to jump into this world and really took in what worked well at a lot of these big tech companies, and kind of took it back to the fundamentals and started it by thinking, okay, what is an organization at its core? And really just building it up with our vision to do that. And I can't get into too many details about how we're building it exactly, but I think the overarching theme is that we capture as much data as we can. We have the transparency, and our contributors are welcoming of that. They're supportive of that. We're upfront about it. And that allows us to capture more data and use it in new ways.
Thank you.
Of course. Okay, well, thank you guys.